There you are.
Okay, we're live. Okay, and welcome to the Anyone Can Farm Homesteaders Question and Answer YouTube Live. I apologize, we had some technical difficulties there. Our first stream setup didn't go. I plan to start this promptly at 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights, and hopefully you'll be able to set your clock by us, because that's the way we roll here at Baker's Green Acres. Okay, anyway, the mission of the Anyone Can Farm Homesteaders Q&A is to provide a platform where you, as a homesteader or prospective homesteader, can come and ask questions. And if I can answer those, I'd love to. I think it's a place where people can listen in and listen to your questions, and maybe it will answer questions that they didn't even know that they had. There is a lot of discussion about homesteading nowadays. There's a lot of different reasons why, and I don't think I'm going to go into those. I think I just would like to address the how-to of the homesteading discipline, I would call it. And let me be clear what I mean by homesteading here. We were commercial farmers for a long time, about 14 years. And commercial farming, we would define that as everything that we produce, we need to convert to dollars, and then we take those dollars and convert that again to the things that we need to sustain our lives, fuel, insurance, mortgage payments, sugar from the store, coffee, the stuff that we can't grow on our own place. But when we move away from there to the homesteading model, we're doing a whole lot less of the one main thing that we were doing to convert to dollars, and we're able to widely diversify and provide more and more and more and more things that we need to sustain our lives. An example would be when I was commercial farming, we were raising near about 10,000 to 15,000 chickens per year. That kept us extremely busy. That would mean that if we wanted to go swimming during the week in the summertime, out of the question, because the more we worked, the more dollars we got, and then the more fun we could have, and usually we couldn't do anything until winter time. And when we produced that amount of chicken, we would have to store that and then meter that out during the course of the year. That meant our product was losing value every single day because of the electricity that we'd have to buy to keep our freezers running. So that's just an example. In the homesteading, where I never had the opportunity before to raise bees, now I do. I have the time to do that, and I'm kind of learning how to do that, and hopefully one day I will have my own bees. But I do a lot of other things. At this farm, we have 2 milk cows. We have probably 6 or 8 beef cows. We have some calves that we raise. We have about 4 sows now, and a boar. And we'll get 2 farrowings a year out of them. So that's quite a few pigs, actually. We have a butcher shop. We do pastured poultry in the summer. We have egg-laying chickens all the time, and so that's our experience. We've been running this farm since 2004 when I got out of the Air Force. So let's get on with it. All right. My wife and minion and helper is sitting by here, and she's got her computer, so she's able to look and read the questions. She will read the questions, and I will answer them. If you have questions for her, by all means, just say this is for Jill. Or if I can't help you with it, I'll defer to her. Do you have the first question for me, please?
Okay. Anthony Jensen made a statement, but I'm not sure what his question is, so maybe he could restate what his exact question is. Um, and if people could put things in caps, that would help me see the questions.
Okay, if you put things in caps, that'll help Jill see the questions.
Joshua Hill asked,
Joshua Hill asks,
we raise mangalitas and mix our own feed from barley, lentils, and purchased minerals. We're trying to feed more forage crops this summer. Do you cut back on feed when forage is available?
okay, that's a loaded question. First, let me explain some of the nomenclature here. What was the guy's name? Josh?
Joshua Hill.
Josh Hill. Asking me if I cut back on feed when I'm foraging. For those of you who don't know what foraging is, it's a method by where you plant fields for pigs, and then you allow the pigs to do the harvesting for you. And there's a ton of benefits to that. If you've ever tried to graze pigs, say on a hay field, you find out it doesn't work because pigs are diggers and they like to dig, and everything is connected to that disc that they have on the front of their face. And digging is what they're supposed to do. We don't think that putting rings in their nose is a good idea. So what we do is we set aside fields just for the pigs, and then we grow crops on that field that they enjoy. So one of the crops that I like I like to co-plant too, and that means I'm growing more than one thing on that field. One of my favorites in the early spring is field peas mixed with daikon radishes, right? And what you get is a field pea will germinate very early in the spring when it's still very cold and wet, and it will get a good head start. And then when you start getting the warmer days, in the middle of May, it really starts to take off. If you co-plant it with something like a daikon radish, what you get, a daikon radish, if you don't know, is also called a forage radish. They're long, they can get up to 2 feet long, they're white, and it depends where you're growing them, what the soil's like, but on my place, I had really poor soil in one field that I'd set aside for pigs. About 1 foot would grow below the ground and another foot would grow above the ground. So you had this massive radish like this, about that big around. Sometimes they would split, sometimes the pigs would just break them off. But a tremendous amount of carbohydrates coming out of that field. And the advantage that you get is the pigs do the digging for you. They're going down deep after the tip of that radish. And in the meantime, they have all this field pea out there that they will eat every bit of it. They'll eat the roots, the stalks, everything. So Josh is asking if I cut back my commercial feed or my pig feed on my mangalitas while I'm doing that. Well, yeah, I do, because what I want to do is I want them to eat everything that's out in that field. So it's kind of like when you're feeding your children. If if you don't have any kids, I'll just tell you how it is. If you bring out the dessert, let's say, before they've eaten all the stuff that they don't like, they're really not going to eat the stuff they don't like. So even in a crop like field peas, they're going to go after the pea pods first because they're sweet, and we would too. But if you hold their feed, they will turn that entire plant into pretty high quality. We're talking mangalitsa here, so pretty high quality fat and lean. But let's say that you're talking feeder pigs, right? And these would be pigs that you just want them to get big as quickly as possible. I would still give them their feed, all right? Because you want that caloric intake to be very high and very easy for them to take in. If it were sows, and a sow being a female pig that you're going to use for breeding, I wouldn't give her anything if she didn't need it, and let her spend her day foraging in that field. So long as there's something out there for her to eat, she'll eat it. So, big difference between sows and feeders. With your sows, there's times when you really want to give them a lot to eat, and that would be just before you're going to breed them. You want to what they call flush them, so you give them a really high caloric diet, so they'll drop as many eggs as possible, and you'll get as big a litter as you can. Now that's one way of doing it. I don't do that because I don't need huge litters in the homesteading business. But in commercial farming, you want as many baby pigs as possible. Okay, I hope that helps. Next question, please.
Okay, this was Anthony Jensen. I'll
Anthony
give you his.
Jensen.
He didn't clarify, but it'll give you. It's still good. You remember he's, I believe, from Arizona, somewhere in that area of the world.
Okay, I don't remember.
He said, my radishes started coming up 2 days ago, but today I noticed all the leaves were eaten off of the little sprouts.
All right. Who ate them? When you feed, let me clarify, maybe I didn't. When you seed a field for your pigs, you can't have the pigs on there. You have to put the pigs on there after the field has made it to the place where you feel comfortable putting the pigs on. And this is one of the beautiful things about foraging is if your daikon radishes only get 6 inches long and it's time for you to put the pigs in, you do it. Now, you may do that because you've got your field divided up, or you use a hot wire to limit how far down the field your pigs are going. And you may let them get on there when you don't have very much growth at all, just to get them started eating something, and then you're moving your hot wire, every couple of days or something. So by the time you get to the end of that field, you may have full growth. I have several fields, so I like to get every day that I can of growth before I put pigs in there. I really think it's cool when I put pigs on a field and I can't see them in there. Like, I go out there and look for them, and I actually get a little panicky, like, did they get abducted by aliens? But the field sometimes will be 3 or 4 feet high with forage, and the pigs are laying down, you just can't see them. Next question.
Eddie Watling.
Eddie Watley.
I have acquired some ground that was plowed 10 years ago, and I'm planning to put hogs out on that area. Would you till stripes and plant radishes in a few areas, or just let them go to work?
Well, one of the nice things about putting pigs on a field, like if your field was tilled 10 years ago, then I'm going to assume that it's just weeded in. When you run your pigs over it, something like a weed, that's a term that we use. Anything that we don't think we can eat, we'll call it a weed. Go pull those weeds. But when you're in the foraging mindset, here in Michigan, northern Michigan, if I till a field, let's say I go out my hay field and I tilled 6 feet, 100 feet long, I would have the nicest stand of lamb's quarter come up that you ever saw. And people will say, oh, those are weeds. They'll say that's pigweed. They call it all kinds of stuff. Lamb's quarter, actually, you can sell it at the farmer's market, and people think that you're really a trendy farmer. But it's kind of classified as a weed. So the pigs love it. Cattle love it. Cattle will lick the rocks off. That's what a guy said to me one time. They love it so much. And there's different places in the growth of that weed that they like more than others. Like when it first comes up and it's young and tender, they really like it. When it gets kind of stocky, they don't like it so much. But it depends where they're at too. If they don't have a whole lot to eat, they'll go back and they'll eat it. So, you know, you don't have to spend any diesel fuel on tillage. You could just put the pigs out there and they will clear it off. I've got fields right up here close to the house, and I do videos on this quite a bit. And I show the fields when they're in full forage, and then I show them, you know, when the pigs in 3 weeks or a month have taken every blade of grass off that field, and I mean every blade of grass, and then every root they have dug it up and eaten it, and they manure it back and they urinate back to that field. So when we talk about doing foraging in pigs, we do get a free lunch, and let me explain what I mean. You know, I've heard the saying, "There ain't no free lunch." Well, that's not true. You do get your sunshine, and in this state anyway, they're not taxing me on that. I probably shouldn't give them any ideas. On the rain, we don't get taxed on that yet. I think in New Jersey they do. The oxygen that we breathe and that our plants breathe, the CO2 that they breathe, and the wind that sweeps across and brings nutrients, we don't pay for any of that. And then all the biology that's in our soil, that is all kind of taken care of by our pigs, because they're eating in that field and they're manuring right in that field. So they put a lot of bacteria into the soil, and then they're mixing that all around as they dig. And, you know, if we were, let's say we were commercial farming vegetables in that field, somebody'd have a real hard time with us doing that because, oh, there's pathogens, you know. But so long as it's for the pigs, they don't mind. Hope that answers your question. Foraging is a deep subject. And I've done videos on this where we will dig everything in a square foot, and then we calculate the forage on an area. And it is mind-blowing how much carbohydrates you can grow, and then how much you get back when your animals are taking off of it what they want. You take the animals off and use them for what you want, and then your soil is also being improved. You know, it's fortified having those animals on it. And one of the tricks is to do enough growing on it to where you don't let the soil get out of balance, and that would be when it would sour, is what they call that. Next question.
TSX 3214 in Northeast Ohio wondered if all your freestanding buildings are original.
This guy a tax collector? No, my freestanding buildings are... No, they are not all original. The house is, and the barn is. The butcher shop is not. There was an old chicken house there, so we utilized the foundation, and it had burned down many, many years ago, and we built the butcher shop there, and then we had to add on to it and pour a little bit more concrete. We also have a clear span building, and that building is fabric covered, and we store hay in there. And everything else, I move around. I try to keep them on skids. Next question.
Dave and Amanda wonder, have you ever attempted to smoke one of your hams instead of curing it as prosciutto?
Yes, we have. Okay, smoking hams. There's a number of different ways to cure a ham. There's a dry cure, and I think people know what that is, but that's where we feed the animal properly so that there's a lot of nitrates. I mean, not nitrates. What's the word I'm looking for? Not nitrates.
Salt?
No. Tannic acid. If we feed the animal properly, we're talking a pig here, and we feed them feeds that are high in tannins, tannic acid, like acorns, things like that, then we put a lot of that tannic acid in the fat, and it helps us resist rancidity. So then you can take that ham and you can hang it at 60 degrees, 60% humidity at the proper time of the year. You don't want to do it in the summer when there's flies, but you do it in the fall when it's pretty cold and there's no flies, and that ham will cure. We exercise a little bit of redundancy on that, so redundancy being belt and suspenders, where we'll actually use some pickling salt or sea salt, and we'll put it on the exposed bone just to prevent any other problems. And we'll hang that at 60 degrees, 60% humidity, and we will have a ham in a very short order. The other way to do it is to make a wet cure, and there's all kinds of recipes for that. And you would soak that ham, submerge that ham in that wet cure, and then you can eat it right then. You can hang it right then. You can save it. You could freeze it. You could pickle it. You could can it, or you could smoke it. Smoking generally was done back in the day when you had to do some butchering in the summertime. So you would have a smokehouse, and the purpose of that smoke was to keep the flies off, and then to get that smoke into the meat. It would resist the flies. It was never intended to be a light the smoker and walk away in the summertime. It would give you a break. Once you had smoke billowing in that smokehouse, or even wafting up through that smokehouse, it would give you a break where the flies couldn't get to the meat. And then once you got a nice dry hard crust on that meat, then it would be relatively safe from the flies. But yeah, try it, let me know how it works out.
D. Mac wondered, how is your worm content in the soil, or do the pigs eat those too?
I would reckon that the worms do get eaten by the pigs. I would. But if you've ever dug worms, it would be pretty hard for you to go out there and get all of them. And I think the worms probably wise up after a while. I know when we're digging worms for fishing, they do catch on, and as soon as you break the soil loose, they're gone. They're going deep. I know that I have a lot of worms out there, so I guess my answer would be, if they were gonna get them all, they would have, because that field, I call it my produce field, or my forage field. Sometimes I call it my grow area. Yeah, grow area, that's what I call it in my videos. We've been doing that for about 4 years now, and there's plenty of worms out there. So I would say your worms are going to be safe. I think if you wanted to, I'm a big proponent of stacking the deck whenever you can. What I mean by that is taking every advantage you can get. So let's say that you're growing or you're managing a forage field. Would you put compost on it if you had it? Sure. Would you put biochar on it if you had it? Sure. If you were so inclined that you could send away for a bunch of worms and put them on there, let's say when you're just planting your seed, so the worms could get a real start on it, oh yeah, by all means, I'd do that. The worms give you a real advantage on that field. So you're not just growing, like say daikon radishes, you're not just growing the produce that the pigs are going to eat. You're managing the soil, and then on the other end, let's say you're going to be taking off, lean and fat via your pigs. So whatever you put in on this end, you're going to take off on the other end. I I do a lot of composting, and I spread a lot of compost on that field. Whenever I have extra, I'll use it out there. I also am a big time scrounger, so when I see the guys trimming the power lines, trimming the branches on the power lines, they are more than happy to dump that stuff on my property if I give them a good driveway to come in and a clear area. So I would add those wood chips to the field as well. Pigs will utilize some of it. They love to eat stuff like that. And then the bacteria in the soil will take care of the rest of it.
James J. Pettigrew wants to know, can you feed Mangalitsa pigs mostly on hay like alfalfa, like 60 to 70%, meaning can they grow well on hay and grass diet?
Yeah, one of the things about the Mangalitsa, and for you guys that are tuning in and are not savvy to this Mangalitsa term, Mangalitsa is a breed of pig, originates in Hungary, and was brought into the United States about 12 years ago now. And, you know, a lot of people are trying a lot of different things with them. We had them from kind of the beginning, so we've done a lot with them. We've butchered a lot of them, and we've fed them just about everything you can. At one time on this farm, things were kind of rough. As some of you know, we were having some problems with the Department of Natural Resources and our pigs. And they had pretty effectively shut down our markets. So I had pigs and I had no money. So what we had to do was butcher a lot of them, and then we had to figure out a way to feed them. So who would ever think when you see a bunch of pine boughs laying on the side of the road that maybe the pigs will eat those? I would never think that, but I was in a position where I had to feed them something. And so we would pick stuff up, whatever we could find, and feed it to them. And it was surprising what they would eat. They will eat straw. And that's when we started feeding a lot of hay, because I've got 50 acres or so of hay ground here. And just my experience in farming is hay you feed to cows or steers or calves. I did not think to feed it to pigs, but when we were in that predicament, I would drop a round bale in there, and sure enough, they would eat it. And they'd actually do quite well on it. When it comes to your sows, I would say if you had to, just feed them on hay. But there again, if you don't have to, why wouldn't you give them a little bit more concentrated feed, like some grain in there or some protein in there, whatever you can get. The one thing you're going to hear me say this over and over is when it comes to hog concentrate, leave it alone. If you buy hog chow from any of the big suppliers, it's going to have hog concentrate in it. You are bringing problems onto your farm, and that's a subject for another time. I don't want to go into it, but when you're feeding hay, the higher the protein, the better. So something like a third cutting alfalfa could be, depending on your ground, too hot for cattle. They could eat a little bit of it, but if they got too much, they could bloat, and that means that the gas in their stomachs, and they bloat up, and they can die from that. Can. I'm not saying they're going to, but they can. On first and second cutting, it's kind of unheard of for a cow or even a horse to bloat, or a goat for that matter. But with third cutting alfalfa, it's quite dangerous because you can hurt a lot of cattle pretty quick. But third cutting alfalfa is extremely dense, and it's very heavy, and it's high in protein. You can give it straight to pigs, and it's not going to hurt them. So, you know, if you've got somebody around you that's willing to do a third cutting, that's quite high in protein. Now, in the southern states, it's different, but up here in the north, usually third cutting is pretty rough. and you got to be careful of it. Usually what they'll do up here is they'll turn it into haylage, and that's where they ferment it. But yeah, I think you could feed it straight. I think, though, the goal sometimes is to get your animals to market weight a little faster than that. But it's one of those things where just you're there, so you're feeding them hay. How are they doing? How do they look? I mean, they certainly can process it, and if it's all they had, they certainly would eat it. So I have not done it, but I just haven't fed them nothing but hay. Has always been something else.
Eddie Watling again.
Yes, Eddie.
Wondered, did you get your original sows as piglets so they would be more tame, as opposed to getting older pigs that are already bred or ready to breed?
My original sows were born here, so yeah, they would have been piglets. And Eddie's wanting to know if I think tame pigs are a good idea. If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you'll see that my pigs are they're not tame like puppies. I don't like them like that. I like them when they move away from me when I go in. The Mangalitsa pigs that I've seen so far, and I have blondes and swallow bellies, when the babies are born, they're just naturally skittish of human beings. And I think it's because of their roots in the heritageness of the breed. They're very close to the root stock, which would have been the Eurasian wild boar. That's where all pigs' DNA comes from. And the variants that we see, like the Hamps and the Yorkshires and stuff like that, that's all selective breeding to get them like that. But they all have the common ancestry of the Eurasian wild boar, and they are by nature, they're skittish of people when they're born. I like them like that. I don't like it to when I go in a pen, I'm getting mobbed and they're pulling at my clothes, wanting to be petted. I don't like that. So I don't see a real upside of having them friendly, super friendly, except for your boars. Your boars can do you a lot of damage if they're ugly and want to attack you. So you don't want that. I have a boar here, and his name is actually Friendly, and he's been here it's in his 6th year right now. And he is quite friendly, and it's pretty good that he's friendly.
Except that he's rather intimidating.
Yeah, he's intimidating because he's big and he's got some super tusks on him. And he has swung around and got Jill a few years ago. And there was a good reason for that, though. And the other day we were talking about that here, like how long are we going to keep him and what should we do about his tusks. And I said, but he's never done that to me. And then that day, it was a cold day, and I went out and I was looking him over, and he swung around and he got me, but I had coveralls on, so it didn't get through to my leg. But he did hit me, and it hurt. But yeah.
Joshua Hill.
Joshua.
Again, he's in Montana, by the way.
Montana.
How long does it take you to get your pigs to market weight?
We are going, it depends what you mean by market weight. See, market weight is a term that comes out of the industrial agriculture model. And how do they gauge their market weight? What they're looking for with market weight is an animal that's going to have the best feed to flesh conversion rate. All right, so a pig grows really well. Certain types of pig grow really well until they hit about 250 pounds, and then they'll slow down. The standard breed that they have in hog houses all over the United States is a cross between a landrace and a Yorkshire, right? And the market weight on them is, I think, 280 pounds, last time I checked. And that's because at that rate, at that weight, they start to lose ground on the feed to rate of gain coefficient, right? They start losing ground there. So they'll say, okay, at 280 pounds, that's market weight. Well, then at the slaughterhouses, they tool everything to a 280 pound animal. So, your conveyor is a certain height, and, the height that the tables are a certain height. The width of the aisles is a certain width. So that's what they'll call market weight. But with the Mangalitsa, we're talking a heritage breed, and people are doing far different things with them than what they're doing with, the standard pig that comes out of what they'll call a CAFO, a concentrated animal feeding operation. Those pigs are turned into pork chops, hams, Boston butts, and sausage, pretty much, and bacon, right? And they all look the same. If you look at Oscar Mayer, no, I shouldn't say that, should I? If you go to the store and you look at bacon, it's all the same. Every bit of it's the same. But I have customers that want 300-pound pigs. They just like them 300 pounds. I did one this weekend that was 350 pounds. So the rate of gain is all going to be different when they're out on pasture because their personalities are different. Some of them are going to want to eat more than others. Some of them aren't as concerned with eating all the time and they would rather play. So some of them are going to be more muscular than others. Some are going to be fatter than others. Sort of like if you looked at a playground, of children. They're all going to be different. So market weight, I don't know what to tell you on that. I would say they need to be 250 pounds. That's where we like them. My family likes them. But I have butchered them for people that wanted small ones. They wanted smaller pork chops. So I don't know what to tell you. I get ours up to a year, and they seem to be matured. You can see all the muscle groups are in. And I think it's the difference between, an immature animal, which in the CAFO scenario, those pigs are about 6.5 months old, and then they're going to slaughter. So they're juveniles still. They haven't even reached maturity, and then they're going to slaughter. But in the industrial ag business, it's all about the bottom line. When they talk fat hogs, they're just talking about a hog that has reached what they consider a market weight, which could be about 280 pounds now, I think. Not sure. Not in that business. Don't do it that way. Yes, ma'am.
All right. We've got a few people on the same thing here. Steve Trombley, James Pettigrew, and 2 Quacks and 5 Clucks Farm. If necessary, can the tusks be removed? If so, how? James asked, why leave the tusks? And the lady from 2 Quacks and 5 Clucks Farm had been told that you should leave them. So why would you want to take them off?
All right. The only time I've ever taken tusks off of a boar was at my last farm in Montana. I had a piece of hog panel that was separating a couple of pens, and one of my boar got his tusk hooked under that. And you will notice with pigs, if you ever put a rope on them or anything and you hold their head down, they immediately pull back and they will never even think to put their head down and back out. So he did this twice. He got his tusk hooked under this piece of hog panel that was staked down and it wasn't going anywhere. And he was a big animal. Yeah, he was big. He went about 600 pounds when we finally knocked him off. His name was Gordy. And The first time it happened, it freaked me out because he was squealing so loud you couldn't believe it. And I went in there, I pushed down on his head as hard as I could, and it was like pushing against a rock. I couldn't move him. And so I went back to the shop and I got some bolt cutters and I cut the fence and he got away. And boy, did he get away. He saw me as the one who had assaulted him. It wasn't me. I was the one who freed him, but he didn't know. And this is gonna feed into that answer why you shouldn't do this. But the next time I mentioned it to a friend of mine who was also a butcher, and he was the guy that got me started in butchering. And I mentioned to him that that happened. He says, the next time that that happens, just go get a big hammer and smack him right in the tooth, and it'll break that thing right off. The next time it happened, it was late at night. Me and Joe laying in bed, probably midnight, and we hear this terrible squealing. I go out there, and there he is, stuck in the same place, pretty close to the same place. So I just instinctively went back to the shop, got a 5-pound sledgehammer, and went out there and kabang! And when I did, he reared back from that, and he stood there and he looked at me, and I was cornered. And then I raised it up again, and he backed away, and he went out. Ever since after that, me and Gordy weren't such good friends. And that was the reason why I decided, I don't think I'm going to do this again. A few years ago, I had said, I'm going to make a video of doing this because I think it's a safety issue, and I think people that are doing Mangalitsa pigs should know how to do this. And I read up on it and stuff, and the way people do it, same pair of bolt cutters, you go out there and you restrain the animal by putting a lasso around his bottom jaw and then pulling it down underneath a fence or a root or something that's solid. And when you pull down, he'll pull back up, and then he exposes himself, and you can just go clip, clip. But then I thought back to my escapades with Gordy and smacking him with a 5-pound sledgehammer, and I decided, you know what? It's better to just stay clear of him, and I don't want my kids in there playing with him anyway. And then I'll just, when I go in, if he's aggressive, I will just, you can actually take a pitchfork in with you, and if you understand the rhythm of the animal, you can stick that pitchfork lightly in the ground, and if the animal swings around, he'll hit that before he hits you, and you can keep yourself out of trouble. No, I don't recommend doing it. I think it's mean. I think it's cruel. I've actually castrated 5-year-old pigs, and the last time we did it, we decided that we would get the vet to do it because we thought it was cruel, and I still think it's cruel, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And it didn't work out anyway because they still kind of stunk even when you cut their testicles off and leave them for a while. They get really tough and they stunk. And that is a subject that if you bring that up on the internet, people will chime in all about what they've heard. But I've done it at least 3 times, butchered animals that still had their testicles, or they were removed shortly before that, or 3 months before that. And every time, it's not worth it. You're going to process, 500 pounds of meat, and it smells like urine. It's just not worth taking the risk. In my case, I have a butcher shop here. I can do it myself. If it smells bad, the meat's not going to go to waste because I have guardian dogs that have to be fed as well. And they don't mind that smell. They probably actually prefer that smell.
Did you talk about why they clip the eye teeth and to tusk
yeah.
them traditionally or in the bigger systems?
Yeah, okay.
Which you don't have to do pastured.
Okay, we're homesteaders, we're pastured people. We are not needing to adhere to the things that you will read about in, like, university textbooks. And I have several of them, so usually they're geared towards confinement operations, confinement feeding operations, CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs. That's confinement. That's like a hog house, no windows in it, just got a slatted floor so the manure goes through into a pit, They got to have great big huge fans because that methane is coming up through the animals and it would choke them to death. So in confinement, what they do when your pigs are born, at the same time you're going to castrate them, and that's where you remove the testicles, at about a week or 2 weeks, they will actually cut the tails off with a pair of scissors or a pair of diagonal cutters, and they'll cut the teeth, the eye teeth off, and the bottom ones too, on a baby pig. They'll do that. And that is so the pigs can't assault each other. It takes their weapons away from them. And when they have them in confinement like that, and they're all confined and there's no place for them to get away from each other, they fight and they wind up killing and eating each other in confinement. If you have an animal that all of the pigs are grabbing the tail, let's say, and it starts to bleed, they get a taste of that blood. Before you know it, you've got cannibalism going on big time. So that's why they cut the tails off and they cut the teeth off. I'm not into that. We've never needed to do that. I did it once when I first started, back when I lived in Montana, because I got this textbook that said you're supposed to cut the teeth off. And what happened was when I cut the tooth with a pair of diagonal cutters, it actually splintered up into the gum. And I wound up having pigs with little infections in their gums, and that's not good. So no, don't do that. Don't do any of that stuff. Castration, yes. Yes. In my opinion, I would not have feeder pigs that were males that were not castrated. And you can find that conversation any place you want on the internet, and you will have some people that have special incantations that they say and special times that they do it with the moon and all this stuff. I say no, but if you want to do it, you can.
Dave and Amanda, can you explain the importance of biochar and how to build a retort furnace to make it?
Well, yeah, I can tell you what biochar is, but explaining the retort would give away a subject matter for the Anyone Can Farm Homesteaders Guild, and I know what Dave's doing. He's trying to get me to give up priority information here. Not going to happen. But I'll tell you what biochar is and why it's important. All right, and then you can find lots of designs on the internet how to do it. The design that I have is probably superior to anything that you'll find in this universe, because I've tweaked it and I've taken it into my lab and really tuned it up. But what biochar is, it's charcoal that's created in an oxygen depleted environment. That's the best. I don't know if it would be in Wikipedia or not, but we've been making biochar for like quite a few years. I think probably 10. And we've just figured out different ways to do it, and you kind of go with your gut after a while in homesteading. This looks better than this feels better. I like to pick this up, I like to break this, I like to smell this. Biochar is some weird stuff, I'll tell you. What we do is I shouldn't say weird, it's some wild stuff. We get cut off pieces of wood from a sawmill. I like hardwood the best. And then we have a retort that we put it in. That retort, there's a burning process that it goes through. It burns all the volatiles out of the wood, all of the creosote, everything comes out of the wood except the carbon. So if I put in a croquet mallet that's made out of wood, when the burn is done, I would actually be taking out a croquet mallet, but it might be a little bit twisted, but it would still be a croquet mallet, but it would only be the carbon. That's all that would be left. The paint would be gone, the rubber ends would be gone. Just where the wood was, you would have just the carbon. So biochar does not necessarily have to be made out of wood. When we were running our tests, we found a dead beaver on the road that was kind of dried up. So we made biochar out of that dead beaver. We made biochar out of dead chickens. Anything that is carbon based, you can heat or cook all of the volatiles out of it, and you'll have nothing left but the carbon. And where it's made in a oxygen deprived environment, it stays intact. And then you can do things with that carbon, that biochar, after that. And what it does, what biochar does that we like, is it creates a physical environment for microbiology to live in, right? And it does other things too, but I can't really speak to those because I don't know. But what I do know is when I look at a chunk of biochar underneath a microscope, there's a lot of spaces in there. There's a lot of porous spaces in there. And when I crush it up and I mix it in with my compost and I spread that, I know that the microbiology that's in my compost, the bacteria, the protozoa, all those little critters have a place to live where they're protected from the environment, the harsh environment. You never want to spread compost on a brutally sunny day because, all your bacteria and stuff is going to be subject to that, and you don't want to have a massive die-off. You want to keep them protected, so you would do it, just after sundown in the cool of the night, that's when you would do it. But biochar protects your biology. And then stacking the deck, like I like to say, if you take biochar, and I have videos of this, I should have like a guide here. I could say go to video S3 and you could see this, but I didn't make these videos figuring that we'd be doing this. But I did make videos of taking shovelfuls of biochar and throwing it to the pigs. And all you hear is crunch, 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 crunch. They love the stuff. And what that does is that all that charcoal is going through their system, through their entire gut system. And the bacteria that's here is way different than the bacteria that's on the backside. But that biochar is going to get inoculated all the way through with all those different bacterias. And then when it gets deposited via manuring onto your field, the bacteria is protected. So the more bacteria you can put into your field, the better off you're going to be, because you want a really diverse bacteria base in that field. And a compost pile is a lot like our gut as well, the human body. There's different bacteria here as there is back here, but there's about 3 pounds of bacteria in a human being. That's what they say. I read it in a book. And the more diverse that bacteria is, the more your body is able to break down and process the various foods that you put in. You really want to have an extremely diverse diet because there's minerals that are in avocados that are not in persimmons, and so you want that. And the minerals that are in your soil, the more diverse your bacterial bases in your soil, the better your soil can deal with different things that you're going to put in it. And in the Homesteaders Guild, we talk a lot about scrounging, and one of the things that I love to scrounge is anything that's carbon based. So if somebody's giving away a whole bunch of newspapers, well, I'll take them. If somebody's giving away a whole bunch of clippings from trimming the power lines, I'll take a mountain of them, and I have before.
Steve wants to know, Steve Trombley.
Steve Trombley, another
If you
troublemaker.
have 2 litters a year, can you keep them in the same pasture area?
Absolutely. The problem Steve's asking if you have 2 litters of pigs a year. Okay, a pig is gonna, their gestation period is 114 days. All right, so if you do the math on that, you really can't get 3 litters per year. So we usually tell people that are getting into raising pigs that you're gonna farrow twice a year. So to make it easy on you, you want to farrow and easy on your pigs to get the maximum advantage. You would be better off farrowing in April than you would be in January, because January you'll have pig sickles. In April they'll be cold, but they won't freeze. You just have a better chance of success in the milder weather. So keep your boar away from them until you want them bred for an April farrowing. So you back up 114 days, and you try to hit the right time. You might miss it by 30 days, but that's life. So you would go in April, you would go in May, but that'd be okay too. So you want to go in, let's say, April, and then you want to go, let's say, in September. August is really hot, so your sow can be uncomfortable and get up and walk around and step on babies and stuff. So if she's comfortable, she'll just lay there and nurse. If she's uncomfortable, she can step on them. So you want her comfortable. So September's a good time. So let's say that you farrowed in April, and then you're going to farrow again in September. Can the pigs that you farrowed in April be put in, let's say, a feeder pen with the pigs from September? Well, not when they're little, but when they get to be, well, when they're weaned. So I would say about 3 months old, yeah, they could go in with the bigger pigs. If it were me and I was needing to do that, I would make sure that there was a division in the pen so they could get used to each other through the fence. Because the bigger pigs can hurt the littler pigs, and they can kill them, and you don't want that. But you can do it. I put in different ages together. They usually fight for a little while, but then they get over it. The key to that is space, if they have space. But if you're going to farrow twice a year, why not have 2 different feeder pens, or sell one load and feed out the other load?
Yeah. Well, he followed up with, but how do you do that when you have them as a family unit? So you may have answered that in.
Well, yeah, Steve is one of our guys that's in the Homesteaders Guild, and we talk pigs quite a bit. And Steve has actually been here for a processing class. And so one of the things I talk about a lot is raising your animals as they would be raised in a natural setting, like in the wild. And these pigs are pretty close to being wild animals. They could survive. And they would be in what's called sounders. All right, so that would be a dominant male and, I don't know, 4 or 5 females, and then they usually break off into different sounders, different groups. But Steve, I think that you would, by the time your sow is going to farrow the second time in the year, I would think you would have taken those babies away and sold some, castrated the males, and put them in a feeding area. And if you're gonna feed them out, they should be on full feed, getting as big as quickly as they can. So I don't see why you would keep them together. I don't see. I mean,
You would have pulled the weaned pigs
yeah,
off.
I would have pulled the weaners off for sure.
James wanted to know how much space per pig. You talked about if they have enough space, you can put different ages together. So, like, how much space are you talking?
Yeah, a lot of times people are looking for definitive answers on this, and it's a little hard to give definitive answers on space. When we're talking pasturing, I'm talking enough room where you can grow a crop in there. And so we're not talking a pen that's 10 by 10. We're talking a field that's an acre or a half an acre. a half acre field is pretty good size, half acre by half acre. Those of you that have been here east of the house, that field where my sows are in, that's a half an acre by half an acre, and it's pretty good. I've got 4 sows in there, and they stay out of each other's way. We've not had any problems up in there. Sows don't really have great ambitions to go wandering, but the feeders, when they're small, they like to run around. So my grow area it's about an acre and a half, and I will have about 40 on there at a time. And then, they're leaving. As they get big, they leave. They get sold, or they're shot in the field and processed in the shop. So the field that I have now, there's only 14 on there, but there's nothing growing on there at all. And the numbers just keep getting smaller and smaller every week. So, space per pig. Do you have any input on that, Jill? Space per pig? I mean, a definitive. How would we? Okay, well,
enough space that they can have their own sleeping area, their own eating area. If you're enough eating space that they can all eat at once, and that they can get away so can't get cornered.
Yeah.
I don't know about the definitive feet per pig.
Yeah.
But because it'll change as they grow too.
But like this grow area that we have over here, there were 40 of them on there, and the opposite end, they would never go there. They would all stay in a very small area, but they could get away if they needed to. And we've never had any problems where they hurt one of the other animals, because they've always had enough room to run away. Usually the other animals, when the younger ones come in, they just want to chase them off, And once they're chased off, but then they all wind up being buds anyway. They all sleep in a great big pile. After a while, they get used to each other. So, I hope that's all right.
Yeah, he says he's talking about scheduling the farrowing. So I'm wondering if he's wondering about how to schedule or space the farrowing cycles.
Well,
maybe.
just when you want a farrow, back up 114 days, and that's when you plus or minus 2 weeks, and that's when you want to put your boar in, expose your sows. That's when you want to do it. And that plus or minus 2 weeks, let's say she's going to farrow or she's going to gestate, come in, to where she will stand for the boar exactly 114 days before the exact day you want to farrow. If you backed up 2 weeks from there and you exposed her then, if she's not ready for him, the most she can go from that day is 30 days, which will put her 2 weeks behind your target date. So you're only going to be off 2 weeks. So plus or minus, you can pick the day, and it's going to be plus or minus 2 weeks. I hope that makes sense. Just start working with the number 114 days. It's sometimes said 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. 114 days.
Okay, Scott in Virginia. How much time did it take for you to learn how to market the Mangalitsa?
I'm not sure I know how to market the Mangalitsa now. It's it's still in its infancy, and the problem with small farms, okay, this is the problem with small farms. If you want to market your Mangalitsa pigs, let's say to a chef, and he is a high-speed chef, and he knows everything there is to know. He's got a big bookcase with a lot of books and stuff. He's read it all. He's still up against customers who, no matter what they say, when they're looking at the menu and they see pork chops $28, they're going to be like, wait a minute. even if they're rich people, they're going to say that's kind of a lot for pork chops, because people are thinking pork chops, cheap, prisoners, school kids. That's what they where most of the pork in the United States goes to. So when you have when you're up against that really cheap industrial food, it's pretty hard to get a fair price for your mangalitsa. Now, some people are having a breeze at it because chefs are figuring out that if they have a superior product, they can ask whatever they want for their food. But that's not everywhere. Like where I live, I haven't found that market in restaurants or retail stores. But where we have found a pretty good market is within the ethnic communities. And this is where we direct market to families. And we really like families that like to come to the farm. We shoot the pig, we bleed the pig, and then they take it from there. And you can imagine there are Romanians, there are Hungarians, there are a lot of the Orientals like to do that. And once you turn them on to that and you provide a nice environment for them to work, you don't rush them. You can get $2.50 a pound for your mangalitsa, and there's no processing fee, there's no waste, and you can still do pretty well with that, for the whole animal. So that's our niche. That's where we found that it's working out pretty good. And I'm homesteading, so we turn a lot of our a lot of our pigs into products that we use. And I have several children that live in the neighborhood, and they use a lot of it too. But I am not commercial farming anymore.
Ryan in Texas. What's your take or thoughts on a no-till drill?
Okay, no-till is, Ryan, are we still talking about pigs here? No-tilling with pigs, or?
No. He's the one that had the question about tractors.
Oh,
last
about
week.
tractors. No-till was where you direct seed, so you're doing minimal tillage to your field, and you know what? I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I'll tell you what experience I do have. When I first got into this, I was big into the sustainable ag community. A lot of the hippie community was in that, and there was like do less damage, less is more. I sat under the tutelage of two individuals that felt as though rototilling was a really bad thing because of the mycelium is connected to the trees, and the trees are connected to the weeds, and the weeds are connected to the lily pads. And I get that. And if we run a rototiller through there, we're going to break all that up, and it's going to really work against us as far as our production goes. But then I sat under the tutelage of a guy that was a lifelong truck gardener, they call them, where they raise produce. They use everything. They use Roundup, they use, you name it, they use it, because they want to get those, whatever it is they're growing, bell peppers, tomatoes, they want to get that to market, and they want to get as much of it to market as quickly as they can, no matter how it's going to happen. They want to do it because they're converting it all into dollars. And he told me, you're out of your mind. If you think you're going to get a good crop out here without tilling, you're out of your mind. So somewhere in between there's got to be something that's going to work. Now, for me, I do a lot of composting. I do a lot of biochar. And I own a rototiller. I just bought it last year. So I'm committed. I got a 6-foot rototiller, and I love it. And I mourn for the the mycelium that I'm breaking up. But boy, do I get a nice garden. So there's my experience with no-till. It didn't work for me. It just didn't work for me. And I love my rototiller.
One last question.
This will be the last question.
Javi Carranza wondered if we've ever finished pigs on acorns.
Yeah, the question was, have we finished pigs on acorns? And we do it every year. We like to cure hams. We call them prosciuttos because we kind of follow an Italian discipline, so it'd be called prosciutto. We like copa, which is the neck muscle cured. We like, what else do we like? We like lomo, which is
Loin.
the loin cured. We like guanciale, which is the
Jowl.
jowl cured. It makes kind of a bacon. So we love doing all that cured meat. We like dry cured sausage, really like that. And one of the ways to make that work for you is with acorns, because acorns are super high in tannic acid. If you ever get a hold of an acorn, bite it open or cut it open with a knife or something and take that meat out and bite on that, and you will probably spit it out because it's very bitter. But when you go out and you collect acorns and you feed them to your pigs, I don't know about standard pigs. I never tried it with just white pigs or regular farm pigs, so someone will have to let me know if that works, because I just don't know. I never did it. But when we got the Mangalitsa pigs, we learned about charcuterie, which is this dry curing process. We learned about sausage making, and we learned from some people that were from way over there in Austria. Throw another shrimp on the bobby for me, will you? No, Austria, not Australia. And they would talk to us about acorns. And I live in northern Michigan, and there's acorns everywhere, except on my property. But we can go to the county park, or we can go to the cemetery. We can go all over the place, and you can find acorns. You can rake them up. You can pick them up. You can get a lot of acorns, and it's fun, and it's free, and it's the caloric the calories that are in acorns is something like 4 times what's in corn. And another boost that you get from acorns is, you consider a piece of corn, it's grown on a stalk that the roots don't go down any further than maybe 6 inches into the soil. And the soils that the corn is grown in, at this point, at this stage in the game, soils in industrial agriculture are dead. I mean, there's almost no nutrient in them at all. So your corn is not going to really do much for your pigs, except just kind of, they'll be the fat kids on the playground, but they won't have nutrient density in their muscles or their fat. Acorns have minerals in them because the oak trees have roots that go way down into the soil, sometimes hundreds of feet down into the soil. I said that one time and people really didn't like that, but okay, let's say 20 feet into the soil. I think you could give me that. And there's nutrients that are down deep like that, minerals especially, that are not in the top 6 inches of soil. So those acorns are going to do a lot for your herd health. I got one guy that I work with, and he's having some serious problems with herd health right now, just really bad. And he has no alternative but to turn to, commercial drugs to get his parasites under control and to take care of some of his mineral issues that his pigs are having. And the animals are seriously out of balance. With our animals on this farm, our herd health is tops. I don't have any problems that are chronic. I'll have things that'll crop up Like we had a pig that was snapping at her babies there in the spring, and I made a video about that, but it's not a chronic problem. We have the one-off problems, and it usually straightens itself out. And I think that's kind of like how it's going to work. You're going to have a problem, and it will straighten itself out. If it doesn't, the animal dies, and the problem is fixed. But your acorns, I think there's something about them, because when I watch the pigs eat acorns, it's like the pig is made for the acorn, and the acorn is made for the pig. And I didn't make either one of them. But they fit together really well, and the fact that that pig can eat that, and it will aid in the curing process so that then I can get nutrient from it for the entire year. It's a pretty good setup. So I would say, yeah, do it whenever you can. Get those acorns and feed them. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those things you can do with your kids. We were talking last week about kids and them not liking to get into the farming process. Well, if you do stuff that's fun with them, like going out and picking up acorns and then feeding it to your pigs, it's fun. It's sort of like picking up, Easter eggs. It's fun. It just is. And it's usually at county parks and things like that. Okay. That was the last question. I think this went well. We'll continue this. Hope to see you next week. Please like and share this video if you could to increase our reach. And
Subscribe so you get a notification
yeah,
next week.
if you subscribe, you'll get a notification when it's coming on. And remember, anyone can farm.